for the main part, I'm guessing the majority of you came here precisely because of that. A lovely presentation from Stane. A round of applause since he stood up already. So just before we begin, I want to extend our thanks from on the behalf of the SGA for you coming here and taking the time off your vacation actually to give us the presentation. And also I need to say that Stane contacted us himself. He said that he heard what the SGA was doing. He wanted to be a part of, well, we can call it a movement, I guess. He wanted first to become a member, he did. And he said, the first time I'm in Belgrade, I would really like to hold a presentation for the community. And that's today, here he is. So thank you so much again.
So first of all, big thanks for SGA for organizing this. I'm really impressed by the hard work that's going on into this. And the reason why I'm really so much impressed is because I truly believe in the power of knowledge sharing. And knowledge that I would really like to share with you today is basically the stuff that I've learned while working on this game here, so SimCity BuildIt. And the main reason is because we are gradually getting near to one big date for us, which is 5 years since the global launch, which is going to happen by the end of this year. So it's already more than 4.5 years that we've been globally live, and the game was in soft launch sometime before that. I've been with that project throughout this time. I know there are games, of course, with longer time as a live product, but for us this was one of the big milestones, and I believe that it's kind of a good opportunity to summarize things and tell a little bit more, tell a nice narrative about how this whole game evolved since the global launch forward. But so first, a little bit of an outline of presentation. I'm going to say a couple of words about me and a couple of words about the origins of the game. Of course, the origins of the SimCity as a franchise, then what exactly is the SimCity BuildIt, and how it came to mobile, and how it looked on global launch. And then I'll go into main part of this presentation, which is actually the 5 years. And I'll go through basically each of the year here had a big topic that we were trying to address developing this product. Keep in mind, of course, that exact real-life timeline didn't align exactly with this operation, but let's not let the pesky details ruin the good narrative here. So I try to organize them in more logical steps somehow. And of course, I'll end up with some stuff that I learned working on this title. So about me, I was born in Niš, and this is where I spent a good part of my life. This is where I completed my basic studies. I studied computer science. But actually, what I really wanted for most of my life was to make games, to be a game designer. And basically, I fell in love with video games. With the first game I played when I was about 5, my uncle borrowed, I think it was IntelliVox, Mattel's console. And the next system that I actually had was Sinclair ZX Spectrum, and immediately back then, I was 7, I really wanted to make games. My mom was trying to teach me BASIC. So yeah, I'm that kind of a person that my mom taught me how to code. She was a professor of programming there at the university. I studied there. I moved abroad in 2004. I did some stuff that's totally unrelated to gaming, but I was doing games as a hobby for all that time. Eventually, I made my way to Finland, to a town called Tampere, where I completed my PhD. I was doing my postdoc there at the time when Rovio was in a huge expansion, so it was 2012. They opened a studio there, and I just sent them an application, to basically an open application. They even didn't have a opening for exactly game designer then. So I'm a really kind of a bad person to give advice how to get into gaming industry, because I think that my career is a result of audacity and a bit of luck there. Basically, I sent them a CV and I said, I would really like to make games. Would you find a place for me in the studio? They invited me for a job interview. I don't know, I obviously said something right there, so since they invited me a second time around, and I obviously said something smart then, since they hired me. I stayed with Rovio for 2.5 years. I worked on a couple of titles related to Angry Birds, of course. You don't know any of them because they were all prototypes. We started production with 3 of them actually in parallel. I was working as a lead designer on one of them, but it was hard times for Rovio. Supercell happened, free-to-play happened. They were transforming as a company. They wanted to restructure a little bit, hired a new CEO who was a guy that was expert at restructuring other Finnish companies. He had approached, okay, let's cut 50% of satellite sites. Rovio had 2 satellite sites at that moment, and we were the one that ended up with the short straw. So they shuttered that studio. I had a chance to move to the head office in Helsinki, in Espoo, but then a stroke of luck for second time came. Electronic Arts approached me and simply approached me with an offer to work on SimCity BuildIt. And simply SimCity was a game that I played as a kid. So I just jumped the opportunity and I left Rovio. And since then I've been with Track 20, Electronic Arts Studio in Helsinki, first as a designer and then gradually my role grew. So now I'm a lead game designer there on SimCity BuildIt. So of course, SimCity BuildIt is a part of a very well-known SimCity franchise. And I say that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. It's a really impressive heritage. It's over 30 years and 15 games during that period. Original was created by Will Wright in '89. And pretty much I wanted to list all the platforms where SimCity appeared. And it's maybe well over 30 of them or something like that. So they couldn't be, it couldn't fit in on a sensible slide here. At the moment, SimCity BuildIt is the only incarnation still active of SimCity for the time being. We'll see what will happen in the future, of course. So we are the only SimCity in town, basically. We launched in 2014 around Christmas time, global launch, and this is where I joined the studio, basically. And what this is essentially a mobile version and a free-to-play version of SimCity, or a game heavily inspired with SimCity. And of course, if you are transferring a big, well-known franchise to a new format, a new platform, a new monetization model, new business model, essentially, you will, without a doubt, encounter a lot of challenges. And I tried to group 4 big challenges that we were facing at that time. So above all, the first one, that applies basically with launching any product or any game, but it's especially more evident when you are launching something that the people are familiar with and already have a preconception, which is managing user expectations. They already have an idea. So when you are kind of launching within the existing franchise, you would probably want to leverage the existence of that franchise, the knowledge that people already have about it. So basically what you are delivering needs to align with that to some measure. And for us, challenge was especially hard at that time because we came on trail of 2 launches that didn't went according to plan for Electronic Arts. Meaning it was immediately after launching of a mobile version of Dungeon Keeper, which was pretty similar position as SimCity BuildIt had, and on the tail of launching of last incarnation of SimCity on PC, SimCity 2013. And those things were both as a challenge and a little bit helped us there. We took some heavy learning from Dungeon Keeper, for the fate of Dungeon Keeper, where people didn't respond all that well to the mobile version of that game, although the game itself was very well made. A product which simply didn't align with user expectations. What helped us was that we realized that we needed to make an emphasis that this is not a replacement for the real thing, but a new quality in the franchise, new game inspired by the original, but especially new user experience there. That's why we are branding it the SimCity BuildIt, which is kind of very important there. And then the second thing was, well, simply because it came on the tail of SimCity 2013, there was a perception by players that Electronic Arts is not shifting totally towards mobile and free-to-play and abandoning PC, but that there is this kind of continuation on both platforms. And this was kind of a big thing that we were very careful when preparing for global launch with this game. The second two challenges there come simply from the platform, from the mobile devices, essentially. So, well, the original was essentially a PC game. And now you are transferring to devices that are focused on touchscreen. So this in itself poses a challenge. For example, drawing roads and streets was always an essential part of SimCity. It doesn't work that well if you don't have a mouse and keyboard there. So we went through multiple iterations of how do you do that in SimCity BuildIt. And even after 2 years of development and 5 years of live service, we are not entirely quite happy with that thing. Though I think we managed to do a solid job in kind of transforming the user experience of SimCity. Then the second thing is approach to sessioning, essentially. So people have a radically different way of interacting with consoles, with PCs, and with mobile devices. The idea here is that time will be used in multiple shorter sessions throughout the day. So basically you need to keep in mind that you are basically modeling people's interaction and people's time, both with game and away from the game. So you need to be completely aware of those gaps between and how you're organizing that stuff. And of course, 4 challenges. So first 3 things are how do you make a fun game and game that people download? But then the 4th challenge is how do you do the free-to-play monetization? How do you make a product out of that, and the product that could live essentially for many years? And we so far managed to be around for 5 years. We'll see how long still we are going to stay there. Team that was developing the game did a pretty solid job in coming with an MVP game. The main thing that permitted us to have a live service that lasts for 5 years is because the gameplay was solid, the core was solid. It wasn't perfect, and by no means, then there's a lot of things that if we would be going back to designing it, we would design differently with the hindsight. But it was good enough to permit us to develop it further, to let the game evolve further. And essentially it revolves around 2 puzzles. One thing is the time management puzzle, which is related to crafting of items, which is similar to many other farming games. And the other thing is an area puzzle that we call service game, which is about trying to cover your city with essential services like water supply, police, fire stations, and so on. And this is something that at that time was setting us apart from most of our competition. And it worked very good in parallel. However, there were things that were obviously missing. So this was at the beginning primarily a single player experience. You could interact with other people in the game, but in a very limited capacity. And the focus on the game was, of course, very much on its first part. So basically, the elder game was missing. So the 2 puzzles that we had and the content that we had was very much focused on first, well, maybe 20-25 levels. And then the rest of the house was basically missing. So when we launched the game, we were pretty happy with it, pretty happy with the KPIs. The AU was nice. Money was coming in, but we knew that we need to keep on developing it further. So during the first year, the focus was on basically adding the elder game. So keeping the players that we already have there, and focus was on ensuring the retention on the long-term retention of the game, because we were happy with the day 2, day 7, and so on. But beyond day 30, we wanted to kind of develop that. And of course, obvious way how to do it at the beginning was adding more content. There's a typo there, but sorry, I was translating this very quickly. And adding basically, for us, the new content means adding new architectural styles like Paris, London, Tokyo, or new zones. So at the beginning, the city was just happening in the middle of the plain, but we added a beach area and a boardwalk. Then we added a wall of mountains behind the city where you could build different kind kinds of buildings and so on. This was paired with a very lightweight engagement mechanics there. So players could interact with it, but the primary thing was how to deliver more content simply to them. Players loved it. They went crazy for it. We had an impact on KPIs, but the impact was always very limited in time. So basically, we would release a pack of content. It would make an impact, but that would disappear after a couple of weeks. So this was putting us on the content treadmill, which is something that you really don't want to do if you want to do a sustainable service, because you need to churn stuff constantly out. You need to be mindful of that. So we tried to be a bit smarter about it. So we started adding features that were a little bit more economic in terms of the content that we needed to deliver, and had a more heavy focus on engagement there. And one of those features was Epic's project. We went back to the core. We said, like, okay, we have a super good core gameplay. It works for us. It works for other games that have it there. Let's now repackage it a little bit so that it works even better. So we've added these Epic projects, which is basically building the game, building the residential zones or buildings, upgrading them beyond the limit that was there in the original concept, which is 6 levels. This was level 7 basically. But we just made it harder, and we time boxed it. So if you start this project, you don't have a leisure to do it on your own time, but you need to complete it in a given amount of time, and it's a lot harder. And now here comes 2 big learnings that we got from this project. So we are making stuff harder. So if you are making things harder, you also need to give something back to players. And the stuff that we gave them, we call them very very sexy speed up tokens. We allow them to manipulate the time. And back then, a conventional wisdom in this crafting games was that you make money if people get impatient and stop waiting, and then kind of giving them a chance to do a shortcut in time would basically ruin your monetization. It's not so. You are actually making money based on the mistakes that people do in solving the time management puzzle or in managing time. So if you use a speed up token, it allows players to speed up work in one of the production facilities, one of the crafting shops, for 1 hour by some increment of time. And we went really crazy with that. We give it a 12 times faster development. So it's really almost an instant boost at some point. So one learning was that you could let players play with time, and your monetization and your metagame would break apart. And then the other learning was that our players, we consider them casual at that time, but we learned that they are actually very hardcore. So no matter how hard we made those epic projects, they were still managing to do them in time. So that was another big learning that permitted us to move forward. Similar in that vein was another update. We released it actually a bit later, which is Future Cities, which is again a little bit of a take on the basic, which is kind of a combination of both, because it does a new architectural style, a new set of content, but it also does a new twist on our basic core gameplay there. So this was pretty much in the first year, but the second year was very transformative for us, because this is year where our actually true evergreen features emerged. And this is where players started to find an actual daily routine and weekly routine in the gameplay. And this is for the first time that our game became a digital hobby actually for quite a lot of people, which is a very sweet spot that you want to get to when you're developing such a game. And basically the first such feature was so-called Contest of Mayors. This is one of our pillars of economy still so far. And it consists of weekly competition events. It's our first PvP feature, where each player is competing against 100 other players. And 100 is an important number here, because we want it to be big enough so that there is actual competition and that everybody gets a fair chance of progressing there, but it's still manageable, so that you are not stuck in a leaderboard of 10,000 other players, but you can see a movement there if you do a small action during the time scope of 1 week. And we wanted it to be a weekly event because that felt like a good cadence for us. and you compete there by completing assignments, and completing assignments, and assignments are actually tied to the core gameplay. So you're asked to produce stuff, you're asked to upgrade your buildings, you're asked to do the activities that you should be anyhow doing within the game. And that worked very well because it reinforces the core gameplay. It teaches the players how to become better at playing this game. And since the rule system is such that you need to basically commit to one assignment, but you can also plan further ahead what else you would be doing, you can play it on various levels of commitment. You can do it casually and naively, doing one by one assignment and don't think about anything else. But you can also start planning ahead or what next you will be doing. So there's quite a lot of knowledge that you can accumulate through this game. And this is very important because it's a mentoring tool for other players that are kind of getting into game. So there's a knowledge sharing between players that take part in this feature. And for many of them, the game really became a hobby. So we started receiving feedback that people are going there with a plan, what they are doing in each day of the week. During each week, they can pick up their own targets and their own goals for this gameplay. And what's important also, they set the budget for themselves, like how much money they would be spending in the game during the week. And this had a remarkable result that basically our DAU and the revenue became very, very stable after releasing this feature, which is still something that we kind of count on very much in. We developed further this feature, and this is also a pattern that we continued. So we now develop all our major features are something that we expect to have an immediate impact, but also to serve as a platform for further development. We developed Contest of Mayors by adding the seasons there. Contest of Mayors has a ladder of leagues, and each week you can climb to the next league, but league is the ladder is only 6 levels deep. There's only 6 leagues there. So we wanted to make better use of that. We introduced seasons. We basically reset the league ladder every 8 weeks. So we kind of make players re-engage with the feature and try to kind of climb up the ladder again every 8 weeks. Because they are expected to give up their sweet spot in the top league just to grind more, we needed to make it an opt-in feature, unfortunately. And in order to convince them to do that, we went for a new special and unique type of rewards, which are again buildings, which again brought us a little bit closer to the content treadmill, but on a tolerable level, because we are releasing 8 new buildings or 6 new buildings every 8 weeks, which is a tolerable amount if you think about it. And this feature became one of our basic pillars. So year 2 was very transformative, but year 3 equally so, because during this year, SimCity actually became quite a social game. As I said, as an MVP product, the means of interaction with other people in game were very rudimentary. Basically, we had just a list of your Facebook or Game Center friends or Play Store friends, and that's it. There were no kind of deeper interaction. But we knew that there was a need for that because people were already using Discord, using other chat clients to communicate and coordinate their activities in the game. So we wanted to bring that part of the metagame back into our own product and control there. And the first order of business was to provide an infrastructure for that, and this is clubs, essentially our version of guilds, where people can create a guild or become members of a guild and basically directly just chat. As such, it was a great thing. People could now meet other people there, but they kind of lacked the purpose. They could do the interactions, they could take a part in com, but they also wanted to do some activity as a club. So we started looking for essentially a social feature in the game, and we went through a lot of ideas, and some of them were pretty obvious ideas like, okay, let's have a special new city which you can build up with your friends, and stuff that went into that direction. The big problem there was with that line of thinking was about motivation, because everybody wants to be in command, and very few people actually want to execute other people's vision. We decided to take a different approach, and we implemented Club Wars as a new PvP gameplay mode, which is collaborate to compete type of experience, where basically it's a battle between clubs, so club versus club. And this is our biggest departure from the main franchise narrative, from the SimCity itself. SimCity is a very non-violent game, so we took really good care not to make it too realistic. While in the main core gameplay, we strive for realism. Here, deliberately, we went for something else. So you do battle not by sending tanks or airplanes or that sort of realistic weapons. We went back to the character that we already had in the games. This is this Dr. Wu, now in his incarnation as General Wu, which is this mad scientist that triggers sort of cartoonish experimental devices in the city. And you basically, that cause disasters. Disasters were a part of SimCity ever since the original SimCity. Now here you have a chance to actually launch them intentionally to opponent cities. And the idea was to make it a little bit less serious for that. We took a risk, and obviously the reaction was that some people loved it and some people really hated it, intensely hated it. And really hated it, even the mention of the war. So they had a preformed opinion about the thing even before trying it out. What's beautiful is that when they tried out the feature, they usually they made a turn of 180 degrees and started loving the feature because it's somehow resonates with them. It's not brilliantly designed. As a game designer, I'm not entirely happy. There are some big flaws in the design, and as a standalone game, it wouldn't fly. But as an addition to SimCity, it made a tremendous impact for us. It's also one of our 202 pillars next to Contest of Mayors. Subset of players plays it, but the ones that do, all the metrics basically goes through the roof. All the KPIs go through the roof for them. And it's simply because it's very engaging. And on top of that, we built sort of a meta game for the feature, which is a card collection game there. So you're collecting cards or parts for these disaster machines, and you are upgrading them and having multiple points there. So even in this imperfect form, had a great impact. But as I said, it was the biggest departure from the original SimCity. We also upgraded that one. It had a great impact when we added a new layer on top of it, which is Club Wars Arenas, which is again sort of a meta layer there. So clubs can climb. When you win wars, you receive some points. When you receive enough points, you climb to another arena, and the gameplay rules change just a little bit to make it refreshing and fun, also the visuals. But in that update, we added some new essential stuff, which is a special dedicated war store where people can spend the winnings of the wars to upgrade their arsenal, basically. And we started monetizing directly by war offers, which is card packs, essentially. So making use of card collection mechanic there to deepen our monetization levels. As I said, this was a big departure from the roots of the SimCity. So in year 4, we decided to go back to the roots and create something for the city builders and not just city destroyers anymore. And we decided to go wide. So in year 4, we had just one huge feature separated in a couple of updates, which is called regions. And essentially, this goes back to the roots of the SimCity BuildIt. Each of the regions is a small satellite city, somehow attached to the main city. It brings new locations, new assets, new looks, new architectural styles, also new services, basically, and new crafting items, new stores, new raw materials. So it's really a microcosmos of the main city, which is somehow still tied to the main city. And the main reason why we decided to tie them so closely together was that we were afraid that if people would start making a new city, they would totally forget and abandon the one that they were potentially building for 3 or 4 years already. So all that emotional investment would go to waste, which was kind of a dangerous thing. So we wanted them to be separate yet connected to a whole. And this is why we also didn't want to just hey, this is another city, but we went with adding actually 5 of locations that you can gradually unlock, but you always have a choice of the looks in this particular location. And this is the feature that we are still treating as a platform for building new content to it. And it was also very well received by our players, easily one of the most approachable and most well received features. Now in year 5, yeah, I didn't translate all the bullet points, sorry, the original was in Serbian. But it means, this line is supposed to mean tying it all together. Basically, we realized that we have this kind of a sprawling monstrosity. We started with one type of the game, but then it went in a couple of other directions. So in year 5, we decided it's time to bring it all together, to tie the loose ends somehow, and try to make it more coherent again. And what we did is essentially, well, we said, okay, we have a system, it's Contest of Mayors, it's very well loved. A lot of our players, by far, most of them are playing it. It touches all the parts of the game. Let's go back to that and let's try to reinforce it somehow. And the way how we decided to reinforce it is we simplified some of the stuff. We got rid of the season system, make it a little bit more system. We introduced a battle pass system there. And so basically now as you're competing through Contest of Mayors, you still get the rewards as you originally would in weekly contest, but then we have this cadence of 12-week cycle, which constitutes one season, and during that time you progress through the tiers. And this is basically very much following the trends in the gaming industry now. You see this in a lot of this system in a lot of games. We are still delivering new content there. You have a chance of purchasing a premium pass and progressing there for further. And this open, so it was very well received again as a feature because people perceived it as more fair, because now you can get these rewards just basically based on your own commitment to the game and your own engagement, and don't depend anymore on the place of the leaderboard, so you can't really get bumped down by getting matched with a lot of other hardcore players that invest more time there. So your rewards are your rewards really. But it also kind of opened a whole new direct monetization channel for us. So this is our most recent feature. It launched in June, the beginning of June, so we are still following the impact of that one. But so far so good. I mean, initial numbers look really great for us. And we are really happy with it, so we aim to continue developing it. So this was basically our 4.5, almost 5 years there. And there were a couple of learnings. And this is basically notes to myself, so it might seem obvious to some of you, but it's kind of good to reiterate them. So one obvious thing, game is really at its worst at launch, and you really need to develop it further. So global launch is just if you're doing a game as a service, it's just really a beginning of the journey for your game. And you must let the game evolve, which means that you need to challenge your preconceptions about the game. My personal understanding as a lead designer and our understanding as a team of the game now is quite different than what it was in the year 1. Some stuff and some systems that we were thinking were really important for us in the game have totally faded into background. What we got out of this is, but basically some other stuff evolved, and we did some radical departures from the original concept further on. And this also goes back to the next learning. You don't need to have it all figured out in advance. So now, this is kind of counterintuitive. Nowadays, when you are starting a new project, people tend to go through a checklist and try to figure out in advance all the answers to all the possible questions. And I think that the goal is to try to minimize the risk, but at the beginning of the process, you probably don't really know your game well enough. You might have an idea what you are building, but the ultimate test will come only from the audience. So you don't need to overthink all the aspects of the games. Some things that we learned is that you can make your game social afterwards. SimCity BuildIt at the beginning was very a social game, and now it's a very, very social game in many ways. You can do also radical changes to the meta game afterwards. We bolted in essentially a card collection mechanic on top of a city builder in a very odd way, and it kind of makes sense for us. I mean, it's not perfect. Somebody will probably figure out a better way to do it. But yeah, for us it worked this way. So the best strategy that you can have for the game is a flexible one. So you can kind of define the goals for each update. You try to hit them, but also one of your goals need to be kind of where can we go next from that point, if that makes any sense. But in order to do so, you still need to have a rich enough core gameplay to sustain this kind of meta game that you are building. And another thing, we started with an idea that our players are really casual players, so we try to simplify stuff all the time, but they actually can tolerate quite a bit of complexity there if you provide the context for it, if you explain it gradually enough, and if you say, and if you give them tangible goals, if you are mindful of how do you introduce it. So if you kind of slap them right off the bat with a very complex gameplay, you will lose them. But if you kind of build that gradually, and then you can probably get away with it. So this is all that I have for now. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.